Angela Merkel wins another term as Germany's chancellor, but she faces a challenge in forming a new government. I'm Philip Yen in Washington.
And I'm Michelle McCory at the NASDAQ market site in Times Square in New York. BlackBerry agrees in principle to be bought by Fairfax Capital for $4.7 billion.
All right, welcome to our hour of Biz Asia America. We will focus a lot about that news on BlackBerry, but we also will look at Brazil and its economy and take a look at the country's infrastructure projects. We'll also have a report on the other U.S. cities hoping to become technology hubs as well. But first, Michelle McCory with our breaking news.
Thanks, Phil. And BlackBerry is getting a reprieve. It has agreed to a deal to go private. Canada's Fairfax Financial Holdings is agreeing to buy it. The company offered BlackBerry shareholders $9 per share, valuing the company at $4.7 billion. Right now, the shares are slightly down in after-hours trading. Now, for more on this deal, we go to our correspondent, Christian Yeo, who is live at the Toronto Stock Exchange. Christian, what is the latest?
Yes, Michelle. Well, this announcement follows what you might call Black Friday for BlackBerry. Trading was suspended on its shares as the company announced job cuts of 4,500 workers around the world and an expected $1 billion loss for Q2. It painted a bleak picture for BlackBerry, and hopes were fading that they'd ever find a buyer, but they have. And Fairfax Financial is one of Canada's largest insurance holding companies, and its CEO has long-standing ties with BlackBerry. Prem Watsa was on the board previously, and he's often compared to Warren Buffett, Canada's answer to Warren Buffett. With that reputation, with those deep pockets, comes a confidence now that if anybody can bail BlackBerry out, it's him.
BlackBerry looks set to start a new chapter with an old friend, just days after a bleak announcement that the company was laying off 40% of its workforce and bracing itself for $1 billion loss. The company agreed to a buyout by its largest shareholder, Fairfax Financial.
Certainly, the employees at BlackBerry are feeling a little better today, but they're still not out of the woods. That deal, that final deal, still has to be nailed down.
The investment firm already holds a 10% stake in BlackBerry. Its offer of $9 a share for the remaining 90% of the company values the firm at $4.7 billion. A deal with Fairfax was widely expected. Fairfax Financial's CEO Prem Watsa was on BlackBerry's board, but stepped down in August when BlackBerry first began its search for a private buyer, citing a possible conflict of interest. Watsa has said BlackBerry's turnaround would take years, not months, which is consistent with his investment philosophy. Watsa is a so-called value investor, known for taking the long view and holding on to companies they buy instead of breaking them up and flipping them for a profit like private equity firms often do. As for BlackBerry's existing leadership, although nothing's been confirmed, it's believed Torsten Heinz would stay on as CEO.
Assuming this goes through, the new owners would not want to change horses in midstream. He's got experience in running this company for the past year, and I think that they'll stick with him.
The deal would give BlackBerry time to refocus and regain ground without the fear of stock fluctuations weighing on it.
As a private company, it can take time to hone its strategy, hopefully become more solid in its financial footing, and then in a couple of years it'll come back to the public market.
And Fairfax is expected to complete its due diligence by November the 4th. And in the meantime, BlackBerry's free to consider other offers put on the table. And now that Fairfax has set the bar, it may well get other offers. One possibility, the co-founder of BlackBerry, Mike Lazaridis, he's reported to have approached several private equity firms about tabling his own offer. At the moment, though, Michelle, this is the only official offer on the table.
That's right. Thank you so much for that update, and I'm sure you'll keep us posted. Christian Yeo live for us in Toronto. Now, this deal to buy out BlackBerry for $4.7 billion values the smartphone maker at about $9 a share. How the mighty have fallen. That $9 per share is about just 6% of BlackBerry's peak share price of $144.56. Now, the company's share price hit its highest close on June 19th in 2008. And back then, the word crackberry was coined to describe just how addicted users became to checking their BlackBerries. So how did the company get here? Here's a look at some of the key moments. In 1999, Canada-based Research in Motion lists on the NASDAQ. In 2003, the pager maker launches the BlackBerry smartphone. In 2007, BlackBerry has more than 10 million subscribers, and RIM becomes Canada's most valuable company. But there is trouble on the horizon. Apple launches its iPhone, and a month later, Google announces an open-source operating system for smartphones. In June of 2008, RIM shares hit an all-time high of $144.56. In 2009, Research in Motion peaks with subscribers topping 50 million and 20% of the world market share. But in 2010, Apple's market share overtakes BlackBerry's, and this is the beginning of the end. By 2011, the number of iPhone users surpasses those of BlackBerry in the US. Shares fall, and the company announces it will cut 11% of its workforce. In October of 2011, BlackBerry users around the world, except for the US, are hit by a service outage, and shares tank below $25. In November 2011, BlackBerry sinks to an 11% market share as Android takes over. And in 2012, the founders, Belceli and Lazardis, resign as co-CEOs. They're replaced by Thorsten Heinz. But just 2 months later, Heinz releases quarterly earnings showing a big loss. BlackBerry ends 2012 with shares below $10. And in 2013, the new platform BlackBerry 10 and 2 new handsets are launched. And the company name changes to BlackBerry, but it doesn't change its fortune and reports another loss. The Z10 and Q10 disappoint. And in August, the company says it is studying strategic alternatives, including the possibility of selling off the firm. Which brings us to now, with the BlackBerry agreeing to a $4.7 billion buyout. And joining us with more on this is Chris Ciaccia, technology editor at TheStreet.com. Chris, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Michelle.
So, BlackBerry's largest shareholder, Fairfax, agreeing to buy out the company for $9 a share. Why? What's in this for Fairfax?
Well, Fairfax already has a 10% stake in the company. CEO Prem Watsa, who is actually on BlackBerry's board, sees that there is strategic value in the company, not only for Fairfax, but also as Canada as well. BlackBerry is a national company. You know, Canada has a very strategic, important investment in BlackBerry, and it, unlike other countries around the world, they actually have a nationalistic pastime for BlackBerry, and they want to see this company succeed and not fail.
Fairfax has skin in the game, granted, being 10% majority shareholder. But what is in it for shareholders? At $9 a share, given how the stock has tumbled, is this a relatively good deal? Is this the best that they can hope for?
Yeah, it is. At this point, I mean, $9 a share isn't a lot, especially considering when you announced, or when you take into the fact that the company was trading for $11 a share as early as last week. Then the company pre-announced second quarter earnings, saying that it was going to take down a huge inventory write-down because the Z10 and Q10 smartphones aren't selling well. So $9 a share is really the best I can hope for, even though it's not a great deal.
How likely is it that this deal will go through with Fairfax? Talk of some rival bidders, offers would come in by November 4th. Any chance of somebody else stepping in?
There's always been rumors that Lenovo would step in for BlackBerry. Lenovo has kind of been mentioned in the past. I don't see anything coming in the horizon. November 4th is a very relatively short time frame, just about 45 days or so. So a company like Lenovo or another strategic buyer would have to do a lot of due diligence in just a short period of time, and I ultimately don't think that they're going to.
BlackBerry's biggest strong point has been the notion that it's more secure than other servers. Its market share went from 20% in 2009 to about 2.7% now. It's always been strong amongst the corporate and government markets. Does it still have this cachet, and can that be sold with any value?
It still does have a strong cachet, especially when it comes to security. You mentioned earlier that it had some security issues, but BlackBerry is still foreseen as the primary secure smartphone, especially when it comes to IT managers. Unfortunately, though, IT managers are increasingly seeing what's called BYOD, where consumers and workers bring their own smartphones to work, whether it be the iPhone or Android, and people are really relying on these phones and kind of pushing BlackBerry out.
Chris, if this goes through, what can we expect from BlackBerry in the future, 5 years down the line? And will the handset live for those of us that love the keypad?
For those people who do actually like the BlackBerry keypad, 5 years is a very long time in technology. Unfortunately, I don't see BlackBerry remaining as it is right now 5 years down the line. I don't think the company is going to really cater to consumers anymore. They said that in their second quarter pre-announcement, that they're really going to focus on the quote-unquote prosumer, which is really more about businesses. There's even a chance that the company stops making handsets altogether and just kind of becomes a security company, and maybe also the much-loved BBM, BlackBerry Messenger, the company might sell that off. There's a chance that BlackBerry gets broken up into several different pieces, and we don't know BlackBerry as it is today.
A sad end of an era on the horizon. Thank you so much. We're going to have to leave it there. Chris Ciaccia, technology editor at thestreet.com. Well, Chrysler is one company that's actually come back from the brink of oblivion. The car maker is now filing an IPO for some of its shares. It has come a long way since filing for bankruptcy and a government bailout in 2009, but it's still not the moment of triumph that's usually for growing companies. We have CCTV's Li-Ling Tan here to tell us more. Li-Ling.
Yes, Michelle, the U.S. automaker has filed documents with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission for an IPO. According to a statement from Chrysler, the number of shares offered and the price per share haven't yet been decided. We do know, however, that the shares for sale will come from the United Auto Workers Retiree Medical Benefits Trust, the minority shareholder in Chrysler that holds 41.5% of the company. Italy's Fiat owns the majority stake, 58.5%, and wanted to acquire the remaining shares, but could not reach a deal. The union, UAW Trust, decided earlier this year to sell a portion of its Chrysler holdings in an IPO. Chrysler's IPO would make it the third and last of all the big three Detroit automakers to become a publicly listed company. 5 years ago, the U.S. auto industry was on the brink of a collapse before the U.S. government stepped in. Industry analysts say Chrysler's IPO shows the company is ready to stand on its own 2 feet, or in this case, rest on its own 4 wheels, and the U.S. auto industry as a whole is on the mend. Michelle?
All right, Li-Ling, so a lot at stake here, especially for Fiat, which is the majority shareholder in Chrysler. We'll certainly be watching that story. But right now, we're going to take a quick break, and coming up on BizAsiaAmerica, we'll have the latest data on the U.S. manufacturing industry. We'll find out if it's still on a recovery track and a conditional victory. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has secured another term, but she may have to compromise on some of her reforms. We'll have a special report from Berlin. You don't want to miss that. Stay tuned.
We are CCTV America.
Welcome back. The other big story of the day, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has secured her 3rd term, but fell short of an absolute majority. Now it could be weeks of talks to form a ruling coalition. Jack Barton reports.
She steered Germany safely through the darkest chapters of the Eurozone's debt crisis, delivering low unemployment and economic growth. And for that, voters rewarded Chancellor Angela Merkel on Sunday, handing her party its biggest victory in decades.
Dear friends, the cheers show that we can all be happy. This is a super result.
The bad news for Merkel is that her pro-business coalition allies failed to make it into parliament.
Angela Merkel is stronger than ever, also in her party. But governing is going to be odd because she will have to form a grand coalition, although she's only a few seats away from an absolute majority.
Merkel's new coalition partner is likely to be her party's main rival, the centre-left Social Democrats. The Social Democrats have billed themselves as more pro-Europe and pro-Euro than Angela Merkel, calling for greater economic solidarity in order to bring the Eurozone crisis to an end. At home, the Social Democrats want higher taxes on the rich and a blanket minimum wage of €8.50. Policies that Merkel believes will lead to lost jobs and competitiveness for Germany and more economic uncertainty for the bloc as a whole. Surveys show that, unlike most countries, Germans tend to favour the political middle ground of coalition governments.
I had expected it. A grand coalition is what a lot of people are hoping for.
But that means compromise, and this time, maybe lots of it. So having won a historic personal victory, negotiating a coalition and keeping the Chancellor's agenda as intact as possible will be the next big test for what everyone is now calling Merkelism. Jack Barton, CCTV, Berlin.
Coming up next, we'll take a quick break. We'll be kicking off a series of special reports on Brazil and its economy. Plus, we'll look at the infrastructure projects going on in that country. Special report on the country's hydroelectric plans on how it could do more harm than good. But before that, here's a quick look on how Wall Street ended up today. It started off pretty much flat, then it ended up in negative territory. Some concerns about what was going to happen with the Fed decisions.
What's great about CCTV America is that we take you around the world, and together we learn about the issues that affect us all.
We're here to tell stories in a compelling way, and I feel this makes us unique.
It's our job to make sense of this fast-paced, complex world.
Every story worth covering has a real impact on real people.
And if it's worth covering, you can bet we'll be there. Whether it's in Greenland, the Amazon,
or right back here in Washington, we'll take you to the heart of the story.
So join us each day on a journey around the globe on CCTV America.
Take a spark of intuition and a helping of inspiration, a dash of contemplation and a heap of experience. Add a good handful of character, then turn on the heat. We are CCTV America.
Welcome back to CCTV America's Brazil Uncovered series. All this week, we'll be looking at Brazil's economy, which is Latin America's biggest, and how it has changed and continues to change. Now, one of the so-called BRIC nations, along with Russia, India, China, Brazil was one of the fastest growing emerging economies just a couple of years ago. In 2010, it was growing at 7.5%. Last year, though, it dropped to less than 1%, though it's picked up a bit of late. One of the primary concerns has been inflation, which now stands at 6%, and that is hurting real wages for the country's working people. And that's also one reason why consumption, which is the goods and services people pay for, was virtually flat for the second quarter. Now, we're also seeing this play out in the stock market as well. The benchmark Bovespa index is down roughly 11% for the year. Now, in recent months, hundreds of thousands have taken to the streets. They are protesting against higher costs, due in part because of Brazil's upcoming host duties for the World Cup and the Olympics. They're also complaining about the poor public services and the public sector corruption. Now, meanwhile, the government is pouring billions and billions of dollars into its infrastructure projects to boost the economy, but authorities are running into environmental and cultural roadblocks. Sean Calebs reports.
Viva nossa luta!
Brazil's indigenous people have tried time and again to stop construction on the Xingu River of what will be the third largest hydroelectric dam in the world. It's called Belamonte. The Kayapo say the dam is a threat to their way of life. The natural flow of the river and fish on the Xingu, a staple of the Kayapo diet. But each time, thousands of workers with massive earth-moving hardware have returned to work on the Belamonte Dam, deep in the Amazon. Megaron is one of the leaders of the Kayapo tribe.
Todos os Kayapo vai continuar lutando contra barragem Belo Monte, porque Belo Monte prejudica nós indígenas, vai prejudicar nós indígenas, é perigoso. É muito ruim, é ruim o que o governo está fazendo com nós indígenas.
Brazil's government says the country needs the dam. It's one of the linchpins in the effort to grow the nation's economy by about 5% a year. Belamonte, at full capacity, is expected to produce 11,000 megawatts of power for the nation. In layman's terms, electricity for 18 million homes, businesses, and factories.
We're in the belly of the beast. This will be flooded when it's completed. You're looking at what will be the face of the Belamonte Dam. And up there, the massive turbines will go into place that will generate all the electricity that will be used. By any standards, this is a massive construction project. To put it in perspective, more earth is being moved here than in the entire construction of the Panama Canal. And all this has been done in just the past couple of years. It will take an additional 6 years, under the best of circumstances, to fully complete Belamonte.
The project's budget is about $13 billion US, but delays and legal challenges to the dam could send the cost skyrocketing to nearly twice that much, and close to 80% of the funding is coming from Brazil's taxpayers. Belamonte is run by a consortium of 18 construction and mining companies under the name Norte Energia. Jose Biagioni is the construction superintendent.
Na atual fase de crescimento do Brasil, nós precisamos de energia. Eu acho que o Brasil não cresce se não tiver energia.
To that end, Brazil wants to build 60 hydroelectric dams on tributaries of the powerful Amazon River in the next decade.
We are talking about a lot of things that is going on right now here in the Amazon.
Supporters like powerful Senator Eduardo Braga says hydroelectric power is necessary.
Otherwise, we have to have atomic energy, nuclear energy, and otherwise we're going to have a thermal generation.
The impacts are considerable. You have this impact on global warming, which is something that's not owned up to by the environmental impact statements and so forth.
Philip Fernside lives in the city of Manaus, in the heart of the Amazon. He's a leading researcher on global warming. Thousands of kilometers of lush rainforest land will be flooded to build Belamonte. Fernside says that vegetation will rot under the water and turn into carbon dioxide and methane, greenhouse gases.
And then it's released to the air at 1 atmosphere of pressure. So it's just like opening a bottle of Coca-Cola. You see all those bubbles coming out?
Belamonte also calls for rechanneling a 100-kilometer section of the Xingu River, reducing the natural flow there by 80%. The government is offering the Kayapo $9 million US to help with their transition once the dam is built. The Kayapo say no deal.
Não vai trazer de volta para nós o rio, o peixe, a terra, a floresta, animais. Tudo isso vai acabar, vai morrer.
So construction moves forward. Many wondering if the indigenous and the Amazon can survive economic success. Sean Calebs, CCTV, along the Xingu River, Para, Brazil.
Joining me to talk much more about these infrastructure projects and the conflicts between economic development and preservation is Paulo Sotero. He's the director of the Brazil Institute at the Woodrow Wilson International Center. Welcome back to the show. Good to see you, Paulo. Let me start by explain to us why this is so controversial. Obviously, Brazil wants to grow, but at the same time, there's these sort of cultural, lifelong issues that affect the locals there.
Well, the Amazon field is a unique ecosystem. For the reasons pointed out in this very good setup piece that you just showed, Brazil has to make a choice. Do you develop the water resources of this precious region for energy production, or you do not? If you do not, what do you do that replaces that? The population of the Amazon, especially the population that lives along the rivers, are very poor population, indigenous population. So this is a drama. This is very, very difficult to resolve, and Brazil has to make a choice. I think Brazil has made a choice, which is to go ahead with the project.
Yeah, I mean, the project's well underway, and to be fair, there are projects around the world similar to this, whether it's a dam somewhere in western U.S. or the ones in China. There's always folks that are going to be affected, and perhaps in a more negative way, and the government has done their best to try to mitigate these impacts. Has the government done enough in Brazil?
Well, that's the controversy. Some believe yes, that the government has over the last 10 years done all kinds of consultations, including communities. Others will tell you the precise opposite. This deals with the livelihood of a lot of people. This deals also with what one of the people interviewed mentioned, is the need to continue to produce energy. Maybe nuclear energy would be a better option than doing this. Maybe preserving the Amazon and using nuclear would be best. But after Fukushima, people have started to raise new questions about nuclear. This is not an easy problem to resolve. I believe right now, though, this is more of an issue internationally than it's actually an issue in Brazil. In Brazil, for better or worse, this has been resolved, and these kinds of dams are going to be, and systems are going to be built. Fortunately, in a sense, the economy in Brazil has not grown very strongly lately, so you have more time to reconsider, to build this more slowly and see the impacts that this will cause before you push ahead with the whole project.
Paulo, if you look at satellite images from that region, and I'm talking specifically about the rainforest and how it's disappearing literally year by year, have they looked at what the impact this is going to have on the rainforest itself?
Oh yes, you know, the Brazil Space Agency has a real-time monitoring of deforestation in Brazil, done via satellite. Actually, one of the leading experts on this, Carlos Nobre, is now the third ranking official in the Ministry of Science and Technology in Brazil. It's not out of ignorance. People know precisely what's going on. People know what are the choices. This is just one of those issues that is very hard. I believe that if you were to run a poll in Brazil, people would say in the majority that they need energy, they support this, with misgivings, because at the same time, probably there are more intelligent ways to explore the Amazon economically.
Paulo Sotero, always good to have you on the show and for your analysis. Thank you very much. A very controversial issue that you're helping us better understand. Now, be sure to stay with us for our next installment of our week-long series, Brazil Uncovered, coming up.
It's not that it's okay to have failures here in the valley, but it's well accepted, because if you have failed before, you actually have learned something, and your next endeavor, the chance for that to get more successful is bigger, is greater. In Brazil, if you fail, you are doomed. It's very hard for you to recover.
They are learning the tips of the trade of technology in Silicon Valley. It's a new program that brings the top young minds in Brazil to the United States in hopes they'll return back to Brazil and be the tech leaders of tomorrow. Now, coming up next on the show, China's Tinseltown dreams are becoming, well, potentially a reality as the country's richest man brings Hollywood to the Chinese mainland. China continues to defy expectations as the latest data shows the economy there is getting stronger. We have a special report coming up next from Shanghai.
I'm Mike Walter with a check of the top news headlines in this hour. In Kenya, security forces are still trying to secure the Nairobi shopping mall that's under attack by al-Qaeda-linked terrorists. The government says most hostages have been released, but security experts say they believe at least 10 people are being held. At least 60 people have been killed in the standoff. The Somali rebel group al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad sat down for an exclusive interview with CCTV. He was asked about the possibility of a negotiated end to the civil conflict in his country.
We will not negotiate with those who are armed. We only agree to negotiate with an opposition that conducts political activities.
Assad also says his government will allow international experts access to chemical weapons sites, but warned that rebel groups might block the progress of those teams. An Egyptian court has banned the Muslim Brotherhood and ordered its assets confiscated. The ruling Monday would allow authorities to intensify a crackdown on the schools, hospitals, and charities that form the base of the group's political power. Security forces had already been moving against the Brotherhood since the military ousted Islamist President Mohamed Morsi. That was back in July. Those are the top world headlines. I'm Mike Walter in Washington, D.C. BizAsia America continues right now. Welcome back to BizAsia America. I'm Philip Yen in Washington, D.C.
And I'm Michelle McCory at the NASDAQ market site in Times Square, New York, and taking a look at some of our other top headlines from the business world right now. Well, you will soon be able to use certain electronic devices on airplanes during takeoffs and landings in the U.S. The federal advisory is expected to recommend allowing the use of e-readers and portable media devices. Meanwhile, airlines are expected to miss profit targets by nearly 8% due to sluggish travel demand and rising oil prices. The International Air Transport Association says profits for this year should be $12.7 billion, and that's below forecasts, but it is still a 58% increase from 2012. And the world's largest retailer, Walmart, says 70,000 workers will be getting more hours as the holiday season ramps up. 35,000 temporary workers will become part-time, and the same amount of part-time workers will get full-time gigs. Walmart plans to hire 55,000 seasonal workers in the U.S. during the holidays. Now, Phil, I'll be back with more on Apple's solid gold iPhone sales this weekend. Right now, it's back to you, and the latest on China's manufacturing rebound. Phil.
Yeah, some of the folks around here just got their new iPhones as well. Michelle, thank you. China's economy, well, it looks like it's on track. The manufacturing there and power consumption on the rise. Serena Diorama is there standing by in Shanghai with details about what's happening there. Serena.
Well, Phil, we're just a minute or so into trading. One of the most reliable gauges of economic health is the Survey of Purchasing Managers' Activity, or PMI, and China's PMI just hit a 6-month high on Monday. But let's see if Chinese markets continue to reflect investor optimism from the previous session when mainland stocks outperformed most of their peers in the region. A separate PMI survey from the bank HSBC also shows Chinese manufacturing activity expanding at its fastest pace in 6 months. The Shanghai Composite Index reflected the good news in the previous session, closing near its highest point of the day, up by about 1.3%, though gains for the rest of the week are expected to be capped since we're in between two big holiday periods. Phil?
All right. Tell us more about this data here in terms of what's happening. Is there an example of the inflation issue that was a big problem and also the housing issue there as well?
Well, Phil, despite the turnaround of several economic indicators, economic analysts say the dark cloud of China's debt still hangs over the country. In fact, total debt in China, which includes government, corporate, and household debt, has surged to $16.3 trillion. That's nearly 200% of China's GDP, up from 130% of GDP in 2008. That's according to an estimate from China's central bank. Leverage has been ballooning since 2008 to finance development of China's urban infrastructure after the global financial crisis. In the words of Fitch analyst, no financial system can sustain rising leverage indefinitely. Meanwhile, a widely followed Royal Bank of Scotland analysts say China's corporate debt swelled to 113% of GDP at the end of 2012, raising questions about the ability of China's corporations to pay interest on their debts. Cities like Shenmue have suffered the consequences of rampant private lending. Shenmue was once a booming coal producer, but it's now known as China China's Detroit. So many analysts say the big picture of what's going on in the world's second largest economy remains fuzzy. Back to you in the studio, Phil.
Amazing statistics. I never thought that Detroit would be this famous, even in China. Serena, thank you very much. Well, one of those areas that she mentioned is Xinwu County, and it was an example of a well-run region in free medical care and education, but now there's financial trouble. The private lending market there could very well be collapsing. Ellen Scott reports.
Hundreds of Xinwu residents gathered in front of the county government building, with rumors spreading that the county is facing over 30 billion yuan worth of financial debt. And they were concerned that the county leadership would cut its provision of free medical services. The Finance Bureau denied the rumors. After the investigation, 4 people were arrested for spreading false rumors. One source of the rumors was a man mired in debt after falling coal prices led his business to collapse. He was just one of the many Xinwu residents who had borrowed money from friends, relatives, and other private lenders to go into the coal trade. Kailing Zhao's son scrapped together more than 1 million yuan in this way.
If my son wanted to borrow money from commercial banks, he would need a guarantor. But he did not have a stable job and could not find one, so he had to borrow money from other channels.
Many of these lenders are now facing the risk of losing all of their life savings. In the past, private lending has played an important role in promoting development in the county. More than 100 financial institutions that once operated here have closed their doors or fled. For those who could not get their money back, looking for legal resolution is their only choice.
Since 2012 to this July, the total amount sought in these cases reached more than 3.2 billion yuan.
It will take a long time to handle all of these cases. Private lending is a common method for small and micro enterprises to raise funds, but people tend to forget that investment carries risks. And the risk is even higher when insufficient legal regulation exists to guide it.
I suggest that the government should strengthen regulation on private lending. Private financial institutions must reform to meet the demand from privately owned businesses.
The provincial government has issued financial reform to help Xinwu County get out of its private debt crisis. On one hand, it encourages commercial banks to take more flexible measures to help small businesses raise funds. On the other, it presses detailed regulations to create a safe and healthy financing environment for the private lending market. Ellen Scott, CCTV.
All right, for more on this, Deng Yifang, Deputy Director of the Institute of World Development, joins us live from Beijing. And first off, explain to our viewers what this private lending is all about. Because when we think of private lending, in terms of globally, it's normally individuals, me lending money to you, for example, to start a business. And if the business fails, then I suppose my debt fails as well. How is this different? All right, sounds like we have some technical difficulties. We'll try to get him back online in just a little bit. Now, talk about China's richest man. He says he's going to build an $8 billion film studio and entertainment park in the city of Qingdao. Wang Jianlin says he will not stop there either. He has plans to build high-end hotels in New York and London.
In the West, the development of the industry has slowed, but in China, it's a sunrise industry that's just starting, so we have high hopes. If the entertainment industry in the West can continue to develop along with the Chinese film industry, then there should be a great future for both.
Now, you might remember, this is not his first time dipping into this subject matter. Mr. Wang, who also owns the Dalian Wanda Group, recently bought the U.S. movie chain giant AMC. His theme park and film studio should open as planned sometime in 2017, and it will be very big. Myanmar opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi has called for responsible investment from China that would help the country. She spoke to CCTV and said her country needed more jobs, as well as improvements in water, electricity, roads, education, and also health. She also said she saw no reason to worry about the recent drop in Chinese investment.
You talk about the falling investments of China. I do not think it's something that you should worry about, because I think what we should think of is business as quality and not as quantity. Let us think of future business between our two countries as business that would improve relations between our peoples. I have to confess that there was a lot of resentment over the last couple of decades because there were people who believed that Chinese businesses were helping the military regime to retain its power. And that created resentments, that created hard feelings. But the fact that Chinese businesses are investing less now, I think is less important than the possibility of Chinese businesses investing in a more responsible way and a more responsive way to the needs of our people. And that will improve relations between our two countries in a way in which no investment could do.
Next up on the show, we'll talk about Apple and Microsoft, both celebrating the release of their latest toys. The future is getting faster as well. Software giant Oracle is kicking off its Open World Conference. The outspoken CEO says new technology will help businesses become more nimble. A special report from San Francisco is next.
Brazil is an emerging global economic power with a hunger to grow even stronger and rapidly. The country faces massive challenges ahead as Brazil's future lies in the balance. We'll be bringing you a series of reports each day as part of our special week-long coverage, Brazil Uncovered, starting September 23rd on CCTV America. In a business world of information overload, we strip away the complexity and confusion to give you the essence of financial news. Pure value. BizAsiaAmerica. We are CCTV America.
And welcome back to BizAsia America. I'm Michelle McQuarrie. Apple's had a stellar weekend. Its new iPhone models helped the company hit a record-setting weekend. Both the 5S and the 5C models flying off the shelves. 9 million iPhones were sold, more than analysts had estimated. Demand for the iPhone 5S was so strong that online shipments are now expected to skyrocket in the coming weeks. And the gold iPhone is completely sold out. There's a waiting list for those that want to have the Midas Touch or the Midas Touch screen, as the case may be. Those robust sales helped push Apple's shares above 5%. Apple also said more than 200 million of its mobile devices are now running the latest iOS 7 operating system. And Microsoft is also trying to make some waves in the gadget space, announcing the latest versions of its tablet. It's releasing 2 new versions of its tablet computer, the Surface 2 and the Surface Pro 2, on October 22nd. Both will have the latest version of its operating system, Windows 8.1. They will have improved battery life. Sales of the first generation of the device have been slow, with Microsoft only having 2% of the tablet market. And also getting into the tablet business, Tesco, the world's 3rd biggest retailer. Tesco hopes that the low-priced product will help boost online shopping and drive sales of its digital entertainment content. The device will be called Huddle and will run on Google's Android operating system and have 16 gigabytes of storage. The price tag, less than $200. Now, Oracle showed some modest growth in its earnings report last week after missing the mark for 2 consecutive quarters. Happening right now in San Francisco is CEO Larry Ellison is hoping to keep the momentum going at the Open World Tech Conference. The company unveiled new database systems to some 60,000 attendees. Mark New reports.
Streets are blocked off in downtown San Francisco as more than 60,000 people flock to one of the city's largest tech events of the year, Oracle Open World. At the helm, America's 3rd richest man and CEO Larry Ellison, who took to the stage to unveil in-memory Oracle databases. The new technology allows databases to be stored on memory chips rather than solid-state disk drives.
Queries will run 100 times faster. Updates will double in speed simply by throwing a switch.
You can quickly match what's in the memory to the processor and everything goes faster. So that's what it is. It's correcting a technology mismatch that's been in place for years and years and years.
Oracle showed off its software's increased speed by doing a Wikipedia search that was able to run well over 1,000 times faster than before. Ellison also unveiled a new system designed to back up, log, and recover data. It's called the Database Backup Logging Recovery Appliance.
You're probably asking yourself, who was the genius that named this product? You're looking at them. That's why they pay me the big bucks. Things like that. iPhone, big deal. How about this?
Oracle's reach is massive. At this event, there are more than 500 exhibitors. But critics say Oracle has grown so big that it's not mobile enough to fend off cloud-based software that no longer requires companies to have their own server.
They have over 400,000 customers. That's a lot. Sure, the smaller companies may be taking some away here and there. I think Oracle's stepping up and paying attention, and it's certainly helping them to drive innovation.
For extra motivation, Ellison reminded employees and partners of his Oracle Team USA boating team, which just prior to his speech, and only a short distance away in the San Francisco Bay, won 2 races in a row to stay alive in the America's Cup yacht race. For Ellison, it's all about speed and efficiency in order to stay ahead of the competition.
And coming straight up on BizAsia America, we'll have the latest on the Asian market openings in just a few moments. Plus, Hong Kong's markets are showing signs of a bounce back thanks to renewed interest in Hong Kong's IPOs. Find out why when we return from this break. Stay tuned.
From emerging powers to expanding partnerships, from fighting poverty to combating climate change, booming economies, war-ravaged nations, and everything in between. We capture the changes affecting the most dynamic and diverse continent on the planet, taking you beyond the headlines to the people and their stories. Asia Today, delivering Asia to the world. Culture Express. See the world in color.
We are CCTV America.
Here's a quick look at the stock markets and how they closed out the session this Monday here in New York. You can see there that the markets, for the most part, ended up down, but it wasn't that case early on. It's been a tough sledding. A lot of investors concerned what the Fed may or may not do in its next upcoming meeting. Now, some of the biggest news topping our headlines here has been BlackBerry. They agreed to sell itself for $4.7 billion. The buyer is already one of the biggest shareholders, Fairfax Financial. BlackBerry says shareholders will get $9 per share in cash. Remember last Friday, BlackBerry announced it would be laying off thousands and thousands of employees after posting a $1 billion loss. Chrysler is preparing for an initial public offering. This after the automaker failed to reach an agreement on the value of the company's stock with the United Autos Workers, which has more than 40% stake in Chrysler. It's been more than 15 years since the company went public. And U.S. President Barack Obama has called German Chancellor Angela Merkel, congratulating her on her latest victory. Merkel cemented her position as Europe's most powerful leader, winning re-election, but her party fell a few votes shy of the majority, which is needed to rule on their own. Now, her conservative party will be forced to convince leftists to join a coalition government. All right, we want to take a look at what's happening in Asia. The markets there opening up mixed with volumes slightly skewed by a holiday-shortened week across many countries in that region. For more on this, Tara Joseph joins us live from Hong Kong. Hello, Tara.
Yes, Phil. Finally, investors can look at data from all markets across the region after a string of holidays lowered the volume of trading across Asia over the past week. Here in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng is lower on continued fears over when the Federal Reserve may taper its stimulus program. In Japan, the Nikkei is down about 0.5% in early trade, and on the Chinese mainland, a weaker open too. Well, Hong Kong is back in full swing after a typhoon shut the stock exchange down for half a day on Monday and brought airport traffic traffic at one of the region's busiest international airports to a standstill. 127 arrivals and 128 departures were canceled on Sunday and Monday. As of Tuesday morning, though, major carriers such as Cathay Pacific were still putting on extra flights to catch up with cancellations, according to the airport authority. Now, some of those travelers trying to leave Hong Kong after the typhoon were tourists from Beijing and other parts of China who come here to shop for international brands during the Mid-Autumn Festival holiday. They may find it easier to buy one top-selling product back home, though, baby milk powder. The Chinese government says it'll give domestic milk powder makers about $4.9 billion to help consolidate the sector to help Chinese producers compete. The size of China's infant formula market last year was around $12.4 billion, according to Reuters, but the lucrative premium end of the market is still dominated by international companies. And Singapore will require companies operating in the city-state to consider Singaporeans first before turning to overseas candidates to fill skilled job vacancies. Starting next August, Singapore's Ministry of Manpower says firms with more than 25 employees must advertise for any professional or managerial job paying less than $9,600 a month on a new national jobs bank run by the government for at least 2 weeks before considering applications from foreign nationals. This is the fourth time since February that Singapore has tightened its rules for hiring foreigners to fill white-collar jobs. And that's the latest from Hong Kong. Back to you, Phil.
I guess it'll be tougher for a lot of those foreigners to go into Singapore. Tara, always good to see you. Thank you very much. Hong Kong's initial public offering market is showing some signs of life. 8 companies are expected to raise $14 billion from their IPOs. That's more than double the amount raised so far this year. Kathy Yang has more.
While everybody waits in bated breath for Alibaba's IPO right here at the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, other companies are making a beeline to raise money before the year is out. Raising talk, the IPO market may be making a comeback. One of the 8 companies seeking to list dabbles in the dairy business. China Huishan Dairy Holdings aims to raise up to $1.3 billion in a Hong Kong IPO this month, according to its listing prospectus. In a sector troubled by food safety scandals, Huishan prides itself for being China's largest integrated dairy firm with control over grass planting, dairy processing, and product development, giving it more oversight on quality. Market watchers say the biggest draw for those wanting to list now rests on valuation as well as timing.
I would expect this favorable environment to continue, especially in light of the Federal Reserve's decision to continue quantitative easing. So from now to the end of the year, I think there will be maybe dozens of companies wanting to list their shares in Hong Kong.
7 other companies are now seeking to tap $14 billion from investors before the year is out, more than double the amount raised so far this year. These include China Cinda Asset Management, Bank of Shanghai, China Guangfa, and some smaller Chinese lenders. These planned listings hope to match the pizzazz of previous ones, like those of Prado, when it listed in the heydays of the booming IPO market back in 2011, when Hong Kong enjoyed the stature of the hottest IPO market in the world. But none so far surpasses Alibaba's plans to list what may be the biggest IPO since Facebook, worth $100 billion, one that could very well give the Hong Kong IPO market the big jolt it needs. Kathy Yang, CCTV, Hong Kong.
You ever wonder how they make those TV shows and sitcoms? Well, competition in Hollywood is heating up as videos on the internet and cable TV basically go after the same viewers. Yakenda McGahey has more on how screenwriters are using computer screens to compete with the big boys.
Much like a novelist, a film or TV screenwriter is an artist painting a world. Their words are their masterpiece, like in the movie Elysium.
Welcome the cast of Elysium. Matt, what drew you to the project?
Neil, he not only had this great script, but there was this entire world that he'd built that was just in such incredible detail.
But there was a time when few writers' voices would be heard.
It wasn't too long ago, I think we can all remember, when if you wanted to be a filmmaker, there were 7 major studios, there were 3 television networks, and that was about it.
Oh, how times have changed. From Netflix and Redbox, iTunes, and Hulu.
What's on your mind, Dove?
To original content being produced by non-traditional networks and broadcast in unusual places like YouTube, creating a new filmmaking generation and a hot occupation, screenwriting.
Issa Rae, for example, who had Awkward Black Girl and I Hate LA Dudes, she had a huge following, and now she just got picked up by HBO.
I just want to thank you guys so much. Some of you may have heard that I got the opportunity recently to work with HBO and develop a show.
There are still now hundreds of independent films being made every year, in addition to studio films. There are dozens of cable channels. There are films being made for the web, and this is great news for the next generation of filmmakers.
Consider this, only a third of the world is connected
to the web. Imagine the day when the entire world is online and when all that content is accessible through some sort of screen. One thing's certain, someone has to create content for all those screens. 31-year-old ABC Studios casting agent Darnell Walker intends to be one of those content creators. He wrote his first story at age 6.
I wrote this story about this little boy who ran away from home. Well, I came home and my folks were in the living room like panicking because they thought that it was a runaway letter. And I was like, I must have a gift. If they believed it, I must be a writer.
And he is. So far, he's penned 3 books, one of them an Amazon bestseller. But ultimately, Walker aspires to make his name as a screenwriter. And with 6 feature-length scripts and 15 short film scripts under his belt, he's making progress.
A couple of years ago, if you wanted to be in the business, you had to have a name, you had to have a studio behind you, and now you don't need that.
And thanks to platforms like YouTube, only the screen's the limit. Yakenda McGahee, CCTV, Los Angeles.
Oh, Yakenda always gets the fun stories. Here's a quick update on our big top story of the hour. BlackBerry, the Canadian company, sold for $4.7 billion to Fairfax Holdings. Now, there's going to be more meetings until this offer can be accepted. It'll have to wait until then, but it's $9 cash per share. There you can see the chart of BlackBerry. I mean, this was a company that some thought could rival one of the biggest companies in the world. There was a time where everybody had a BlackBerry. They even called it Crackberry. They had that BBM messenger, and you can see there the share price is almost $150 a share. Now, just $9 a share is the company basically desperate to get an exit as their market share continues to dwindle and they lose to big competitors like Apple and Nokia and all the rest of them. That does it for our special edition of Biz Asia America tonight. Thank you very much for watching our 1-hour show. Remember to tune in tomorrow and every night starting at 8 p.m. here in Washington, D.C. For Michelle McCory in New York City and myself here in Washington, D.C., thanks for watching.